Oh, be me. Anyway, Anticontivod video. Yeah, might as well. I did finally get this thing done, but I haven't got a link for it yet. You know, where it displays the, whatever you call it, the comments on the side over here and the video over here. So it's kind of convenient, blah blah blah. And but it uses frames and stuff. It's kind of crude, but whatever, works mostly. Anyway, so that'll be coming eventually if you give a fuck. I'll be posting it on that other channel that you have to know where the other channel is, I suppose. Yeah. But anyway, do work. Okay, we'll just play a little bit of this. So well, let me just paraphrase. So we're still at this point where we're obligated to provide proof of delusion. So he'll concede that in the material world stuff, there are delusions. You know, if people think, if they believe in purple unicorns or something, or they have some kind of fantastic story about, how they're, I don't know, Napoleon or something, that we can draw a conclusion, call somebody delusional. But in this subject of value, it's completely unattainable, knowing what the truth is, or knowing something to a degree of authority, degree of character, quality of evidence, let's say, for there to be some sort of conviction in the court of value. You know, this idea of can we convict certain statements? Can we declare them innocent? Can we declare them the truth, or can we not declare them the truth? When it comes to values. And I argue that we certainly can, I've said it before, in these extreme cases, certainly. I think you can call somebody crazy or delusional or insane if they think, raping women makes cows give better milk or something. Some kind of silly idea like I can take or exploit or steal and somehow the victim is better off for it. That kind of crap. I think ethically we can understand concepts like fairness, and we can understand it as a concept that a good game is made by having rules that impose fairness. And then we can understand words like consent and say those are damn important words. We can understand words like competence. So that's why we have people who drive have to have a certain level of competence to drive. And that certain activities, when you're conducting them based on your opinion, that you have to demonstrate a certain competence if you're going to make decisions that will affect somebody else. So in that area, you can call it deluded if you think you have a right to exploit somebody else or to take or to steal or do any of that stuff, and your only authority is, say, nature or some kind of bullshit like that. Because we can understand the process of nature doesn't bestow authority based on competence. There's no character to the authority bestowed. It gives a great deal of power to very dumb organisms. They don't pass any tests. There's no qualifications, and it'd be kind of unreasonable for a thoughtful person to think life would be good if we didn't have rules, and rules that try to respect consent and respect the idea of a fair fight and a fair deal and a fair game. And so I could argue that, yeah, people who can't appreciate that, I think, are deluded. I think they're missing a very important fact of life on a social planet. Now, if you want to live on some planet where you can just abuse yourself all day, then I guess it becomes sort of your discretion. But even then, we do keep the mentally ill from harming themselves. We do understand the concept of that it is quite possible for somebody through their delusions to do damage to themselves in spite of what they think they're doing, in spite of what they think they're accomplishing. But yeah, this override question is always kind of important. When do we have a right? When do we have authority? And I would argue that certainly for most of these questions, none of these people exercising authority, the right to reproduce, for example, have they demonstrate any qualifications for this project whatsoever. They just have the natural equipment bestowed by ignorant nature, and they conclude that because nature gave them this biological function that somehow they earned it, or somehow they deserve it, or somehow they've, it's theirs by legitimate means, and it isn't. It's there by arbitrary means, and it'd be perfectly sensible for us to understand that if we all had acid for blood and could spew acid on somebody at any point or any time, we'd certainly have ethical rules about when you can dissolve somebody else. And just as we have rules about when you can end somebody's life, we would rationally have rules about when you can initiate a consciousness. So I think there's lots of issues, lots of questions that are answerable if you want to sit down and be careful and look a little bit do the work of exploring why these certain issues are more important than other issues, and understanding, I think the key words are always going to be fairness and consent. Those are key concepts in value equations among social animals. Again, we're not living in a world to ourselves, and that's what's really important here. It needs to be understood. And so that's where the value equation isn't about what you think. It's about what you can demonstrate and what you can prove. And there's not equal rights to be wrong. That's just bullshit. There should be a standard that you have to meet, a minimum standard. And I think some of those minimums you might fail, just plainly, because you're a person who thinks that somehow evolution is more important than civilization, that crude forces are more important than eloquent understanding. That's how I see it.
By the same token, someone can say that my view of suffering, i.e. suffering, it's the old whatever doesn't kill you makes you stronger sort of platitude, I guess, although I don't find it, in my experience, all that much of a platitude.
Right, so your experience obviously doesn't include things like having your arm cut off in a stupid traffic accident, or going blind, or herpes, or 5 million things. I mean, there's a whole list of things that will not kill you, but they will substantially limit and harm your existence. So this guy actually says he had this white depression or whatever. It was just so severe, and he thinks he is a better person for it. Well, he thinks he's a better person. I'd like to meet the person he would have been, just because I don't think he could have been a worse person than he is. So that's a whole other issue of who gets to describe. Do we get to describe ourselves, or does somebody, or does some other description account for something? I don't know how you could be more of a menace than you are, frankly, without just acting on everything your values tell you. Frankly, I wouldn't want to be set loose as the animal. I wouldn't set my nature loose, or my initial intuition, or my initial reaction loose on the world. It's only because I have some discipline that I'm worth anybody even going near. Because, by nature I'm just a selfish creep. And, I do understand that I need to do better than that to be of some use in the world. So anyway, but this is a platitude, this whatever doesn't kill you crap. You say, later in the video, he says, that the people he's talked to about their depression, they're of some like mind. It's the best thing that could have ever happened to them. I don't believe that, frankly. It's the last thing I would wish on my child, is to learn, you could gain some character by, going through absolute hell and becoming, like I said, not more sensitive as you come out, but less sensitive coming out, which scares the fuck out of me. So I guess that's, that is the psychology of a lot of syndromes. There's a lot of kids who are molested and they go through a really bad time and they think it gave them characters, and they end up doing the same thing to some other kid because they think it's part of how they became such a super duper human being. And that's kind of deluded and retarded thinking, and we should be able to gain character through less, more controlled, just the right amount of pain. Not too much. Oh, always just right. Never turn that dial too far, further than is necessary. And I would argue that I had plenty of character before I became depressed, and before I had an anxiety disorder that ruined my life, denied me a college education. I mean, it didn't make me stronger. Completely destroyed the person I could have become. So I mean, it's just such a silly thing to say. We survive things, and sometimes we're just ruined by them, and we're half the person we were, physically, literally, and obviously in terms of our position in life can be greatly diminished. Our power, lots of things, totally ruined because of lousy circumstances and rotten bad luck and all that crap. So it is just a platitude. It's absolute nonsense. You're suffering from a delusion if you think this is somehow some truism that runs through reality, that people are better off harmed than unharmed. Yeah, it's just goddamn silly.
They can say that, well, that's rubbish too, that's just a delusion. Okay, then I'm just looking at the world through rose-colored glasses.
Yeah, I wouldn't even say that. You're looking at them through red-colored glasses, blood-colored. It's just this silly. Somehow there's some point to becoming the top dog. There's not some point in becoming the most productive human. No, it's just be the most survivable. Don't worry about what you do in your life. Don't worry about what kind of impact you have on the world. No, just worry about whether you did a lot of rubbing your belly and going, that was good in French. I mean, it's just sorry. I mean, it's your right, to be stupid, but it just sounds pretty ignorant to me. It sounds like something somebody ignorant would say. Somebody, some redneck, who just doesn't do much thinking. Because I don't see how it's possible to do much thinking and draw the conclusion that any game is okay, and that it doesn't matter. There's no point in refining and establishing things like fairness and consent. In your language, is this so? Every single judgment is a tyranny. Because somebody passes a judgment, that's a tyranny in your opinion. Yet people can pass judgment every single day that impacts other people, and somehow you don't think they've committed a crime. They discount other people's welfare, and that's not a crime. I just don't understand that at all.
Alright, so we're both accusing each other essentially of being deluded, and as far as I can tell, we don't have any fixed points by which to determine whether or not.
Okay, so that's sort of the point. All right, so we don't need to go any further. We don't have any fixed points, so that's right. If we can't agree on any kind of premises about what's happening here on planet Earth, then yeah, we're not going to have agreement. But that's not going to change the fact that I'm going to declare you deluded, because I'm going to say there are some facts that we can establish. That we do know this is evolution on planet Earth. We do know there's no God that created this. We do know it's a crude mechanism. We do know that these are precious commodities. I know I'm a precious commodity. Okay, I don't like the word precious too much, but yeah, I'm the precious. there's 7 billion human preciouses, and there's lots and lots of mammal preciouses. You know, little warbles, honolades, little kangaroos. They're all precious. They're all precious commodities, and having them manipulated and their fate decided by crude forces is stupid. It's idiotic. It's moronic. It's falling short. It's not good enough. And if we can't do better, then yeah, the experiment should be discontinued for certain. And there's no really, you can't really do better, but that's a whole nother value issue. I mean, that certainly gets further down the I can prove it beyond a reasonable doubt standard. But this is certainly beyond a reasonable doubt that that it is not acceptable for a thinking human being to think that it's better to go with crude forces than fairness and consent. That's not acceptable. You're deluded if you think that's the best humans can do. You're deluded if you think you can be a good human being and not work towards those ends. You're deluded if you think you're not a menace. If you advocate for the precious commodities to be further abused by a misdirected, undirected, inarticulate, trying to think of a word for the lack of refinement in this architecture of nature, not sufficient design, and that yeah, to advocate for that you have to be deluded by a profound ignorance of how important the precious is and how dangerous the crude is. If you can't understand that, then you're deluded. You're stupid. You're ignorant. Yeah. But anyway, I'm just going to say that yeah, there's 5 facts or whatever they are. They're not too many. Evolution, recognition that it's unintelligent forces, that survival for the sake of survival, that it's crude mandates, crude guidance, and our intelligence creates the opportunity to do better. And that's the true value. And the value is in the welfare of the precious organisms. And it's not in their best interest to be brutalized into the power of insensitivity. Insensitivity is not a character attribute. It's a character flaw. I guess that would be one of the delusions, right? Not recognizing that insensitivity is a character flaw. It isn't something to be proud of. It's something to it's a fault, a failure. That's it. It's a failure. Yeah. So anyway, it really is a difficult subject because the proofs have to be based on the premises. You have to have some appreciation, but I'm just saying some of it is absolute. I mean, in the sense that there's no way I'm deluded in the understanding that I exist through a mechanism in which I experience decidedly, easily categorizable pleasantries and horrors. That there's certainly these 2 extremes exist, and that the horrors are certainly by my experience. I've certainly known ones that have had no value, and I wouldn't wish them on Hitler, and I just don't see any point in them at all, and yeah, that's just too obvious to me, that if you get rid of that crap, it'd be a good idea to get rid of it. Yeah. So anyway, and I think we can, and because people are small-minded and distracted by their own yum-yum problems. We don't. We sell out the bigger future for our shorter present. Once again, that's pretty illogical. If you think the present is more important than the future, that would, I think, be qualifiable as a pretty provable delusion. I don't think there's any conversation you could have about future versus present where any rational argument could be made justifying indulgences in the present that cost the future, megatons of harm. No way. So anyway, enough of the video. It's kind of a concession that the conversation really can't take place because this guy is just going to do it in the form of platitudes, and he's not going to do it in the form of any kind of real conversation about what value those platitudes have. Might doesn't make right. Whatever doesn't kill you doesn't always make you stronger, and I would argue that in most cases, things that harm people, they're not better for them.